Samantha from Dressing Tutorials here, and today I'm going to be showing you 5 different tips and tricks on using textures and also for creating your own textures. So for the first 3 I'm going to actually show you how to create your own texture. We're going to be using a stencil, a silk screen, and we'll also just make one from our head. So you're going to need leftover clay for this, and I have some rolled out over here. And this of course you could use as black, but I actually am running out of leftover clay at the moment. But basically what leftover clay is, leftovers for things such as canes, if you can't use them in a effect such as my Starry Night effect, what you would do is you would just take this, mix it up all into one solid block of clay, solid colour, and then you would proceed to make your own textures from it. So here are some examples of what would be considered leftover clay. But keep in mind you do not have to just make textures with this. I'll provide a link to a playlist of different ways you can use leftover clay. So I'm going to bring over this piece of clay here, and I'm not going to need to use all of it. I'm just going to chop that into 3 sections, and this one we'll use later as well as this. We're going to start with this one. Okay, now the first thing to do is actually going to be to burnish this out, and you're just going to use a piece of plain printing paper to do that, because we want a flat surface and this has some roller lines on it. So just use a piece of paper to gently, well not gently, to vigorously rub out as much of that as you can. It does not have to be perfect, but the flatter it is the better. Alright, now I think we can start with a silk screen, because I know that a lot of you have silk screens. And so this is one that I've got, let's see if I can show you here. I do believe that says Tonya's Treasures. You can see the little logo there. I'll provide a link to that. But you can use any silk screen you want for this. Now the important thing here is to make sure that your silk screen is not too fine. This is like the finest I would go. I want to bring over an example of something that would probably be too fine for this. You can give it a go, but for instance, let me move this out the way. Hopefully you can see the texture or the pattern on there. This would be something that's too fine to do this with. You can give it a try, but again, that might be a little bit too fine. So anyway, what you're going to do is you're just going to take your silk screen, give it a quick burnish, and you can use pastels, mica powder or paint for this. Just make sure it's something that contrasts well against your backing. So this is almost black, so I'm going to be using white acrylic paint. Just going to dab that on there. I'm not looking for a nice even pattern. I'm just going to rub this across. You can use a credit card to do this. And try not to get it over the edge of the silk screen, it's not a huge issue. There we go. And I'll just run that across so it's nice and even. And I'll lift that up, and that produces a really nice image. You need that image to dry before we can work on it. Go and rinse this off in the meantime. Okay? And this is what you should end up once it's dry. Now, whether you printed this very well or not, that doesn't matter. You can see that I've got some spillage. I would usually be a lot more careful, but it's not absolutely necessary for this. What we're going to be doing now is we're going to be going ahead and we're going to actually use a ball tool. You want something with a very thin head. Here's an example of one. This one actually has almost like a pointed head, but the thinner the head you can get, like this is another thin head, the thinner the head you can get, the better. And what we're going to do is we're just going to start on one end of the pattern, and I'm just going to start here. What you're going to do is you're going to just start going along those lines and pressing. Like so. And you can go as deep or as shallow as you want, but this is going to start creating our texture. And this is going to be a texture that can match your silk screen, which is great. Now keep in mind some parts of this are actually too fine for me to create the best pattern. So that entire area, instead of having little loops, was just ploughed in. This one I can go around. And this is why I'm saying you need to be careful and make sure that your pattern is not too fine. This is as fine as I would go, because otherwise your ball tool is just not going to be fine enough to manage it. But just basically go for the entirety of the pattern and just stipple in your pattern. And then what I do afterwards is I then go and gently smooth it out. Otherwise you're going to have a stippled pattern when you bake it. Just go and smooth it out. And this is a great way to make a texture that will match your silk screen. So I'll continue stippling out the pattern, and I'm probably not going to do the entire thing because it would be quite a bit to do. I'll probably do about half of it, but this is a great therapeutic thing to do. Something to do on a cloudy day when you have nothing else to do. And just continue until you have as much of the texture as you want. Alright, so I've done about half, which should be enough for today. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly make a line here. And I just need to quickly stipple in this bit over here. And just trim that out, make that off to the side, trim that, and you can make it as big or as small as you want. You can do the entire silk screen or you can do part of it, it's completely up to you. Okay, I just need to make sure that those bits come over the edge. Like so. Alright. Now, this is a pretty close texture, so what I do generally is I just give it a gentle stretch. Don't stretch it too much, but this is just going to separate out some sections that might have stuck together a little bit. Not stretching too hard, I'm just stretching in all directions very gently. Alright, and then before I do anything else, just check through, make sure that you're happy with the depth. You can always go and deepen it up a bit if you want. Make sure that there aren't any bits sticking together. It's a little hard with the white paint, but you want to just go through and make sure that you've got that checked out as best as possible. Okay, this part over here is a little shallow. But in general, that looks alright. So we'll put that to the side and we will bake that, and I'll show you what that looks like when it is done, and it should match up with our silk screen. Now if you have paint still on here, it should be pretty easy to get off. Just grab some isopropyl alcohol or water. That was actually water in that bottle, but water should work. Just rub and that paint should peel off. The alcohol works better, but in this case I accidentally sprayed water on. Water will work as well, especially since it's acrylic paint. There we go, almost good as new. Okay, put that to the side. You want to let that dry before you use it again. And now I'm going to basically show you what to do with the stencil. The stencil is a little bit easier, especially since most of the time they're larger. Just make sure that your tile's dry. There we go. Stick that down again, give it a thorough burnish. Don't need to worry about the whole thing, we're just going to be using here. Grab your stencil and let's see, which one am I going to be using. I think I'm going to use this one over here. So take that. lay it down, bring over your paper again, give it a burnish so that it sticks into the clay well. And then all you're going to do is you're going to take your ball tool and you're just going to start hollowing out. Like so. And this time you're going to be using smaller and larger sections of your ball tool, because this area you can see we're going to be needing small bits, but this bit you don't want to be hollowing out with this tiny little end, so swap out depending on what area you're working on, so that you end up with a tool that covers the most ground. With these areas generally I like to stipple it, and then I like to gently smooth, like so. And continue until you've done the entire thing. Alright, so I finished. Now we're just going to pull the stencil off, and that should reveal our texture. I just gently want to lift this up, and here hopefully you can see the texture there. Okay. So now I'm just going to cut around it, give it a fairly largish border. Like so. Okay, that's just about square. And you can use a cutter if you want. Okay. Pop that leftover clay away. And there, hopefully you can see there the texture. Okay, then we'll put that with the other one, and that one will also get baked. Now the final texture that I'm going to be showing you how to do is going to involve a specific shape. So let me grab a piece of clay, which I have, burnish that thoroughly. Okay, so now let's say you have a specific shape. It can be any shape you want, ranging from as simple as a circle to as complex as this ginkgo leaf cane. Excuse me, not cane, cutter. And this is what I'm going to use to show you what we're going to be doing. So just take your cutter, whatever one you're using, press in, and this is your border that you do not want to go past, because when you cut out whatever texture you have, it needs to fit that. And then what you want to do is you want to plan out your texture. So let's see. I want some dots around here, and just make sure that your texture is not too deep to begin with. And then inside those lines you can play around and have as much fun as you want. So there's some dots. I think I'll mirror that by putting some dots up the spine here. Up to about there. And you don't just have to use ball tools. Let me bring over some metal ones that I have. Let's see. There we are. So here are a bunch of little different metal pieces that I have. So we bring over an arrowhead here. You can use any texture you have around your house to play and create these sorts of textures. And I generally will create something fairly shallow like this, and then I'll go back in and I'll make it deeper. Okay, and so I'm pretty happy with my initial design. Now let me pick this up so you can see, because I know that the black is a little hard to see. Hopefully you can see that what it looks like. Now what you want to do, now that you've got your design, you want to go through and you want to make that deeper. And so all you do is you'll take your initial pieces, just go through, Press again, and this time make sure it's nice and deep. Okay, then take your cutter, position it into the right spot and press. There we go. And then if you see any areas that aren't quite right, or the texture's not quite deep enough, or like I've got a little hair there that I want to see if I can get rid of. If you see if there's any spots that aren't deep enough for your liking at this point, you can still go back and fix it. But in general, that's about it. And you can use this for any shape. There we go. Okay, and then I'll put that onto the plate of other ones and we'll bake it, and then I'll be able to show you what those look like. So I'll go pop them into the oven. Here are our 3 textures. I'll pop them into the oven, and in the meantime I'll demonstrate 2 other tips. Okay, so now that that's done, let me just wipe that away. And I'm just going to grab this again. We can use that for our next one. Now, first, before we make another texture, I just want to explain something. It's fairly straightforward. So, what I'm going to say is you can make reverses of any texture you currently have. So, for instance, this foliage stamp by Lisa Pavelka does not have a reverse, and I've looked, and as far as I can tell, there is no reverse for this. But let's say you did want to reverse, but you can't buy it. Unfortunately, you're not going to be able to make it in rubber like this, but you can make it in scrap polymer. So here is a reverse texture, and all you do is you basically take clay, you roll it out onto your texture, make sure that it's as best an imprint as you can get, bake that clay, and this is what you will end up with. And now you can use this to create a reverse texture. So let me demonstrate that. Just grab some water, like so. I'm just going to grab a bit of clay. I don't need a huge amount for this. I just want to demonstrate that it basically will create a reverse. Just press that in. And now keep in mind, polymer clay stamps are not flexible, but they do create a really nice imprint. And here is an example of that. And let me just dry that off quickly. And I'll go and highlight it with something so that you can actually see that texture. And there we are, I've made a proper imprint so that it's nice and large. And you can see it's definitely softer than the rubber one. I'm not sure if you can see that yet, but it is softer. Now I'm just going to take some mica powder. You can see that it's the exact same as the texture stamp. I'll highlight the whole thing so you can see. There we go. Basically all I did was I painted mica powder over the entire surface and then used a wet wipe and some alcohol to just wipe off the surface, and here is what the texture looks like. So you can see it basically looks the same as this, except the only difference is that when you make the texture it will be a little bit shallower, and also it will be softer than the rubber. But basically that's how you create a reverse texture. Very easy, very effective. I have done that with a lot of my different textures. Okay, now another one that I want to demonstrate is embellishing textures. So I'm going to be using a Christy Friesen stamp to demonstrate this, and I will be using, so I'll just use that like that. And let me just grab my roller, here we are. And I'm going to start from one end, and I'm standing up so I can put my entire body pressure on this. And I'm going to roll from one end to the other, pressing firmly. go. And that's giving us a decent texture to work with. Okay. I'm just going to try excess bits here. There we go. Alright, so this texture on its own is really nice, but let's say we want to jazz it up a little bit. So something you could look into doing is grabbing a piece of sandpaper, or sponge in my case, and texturing the top. So, another thing you could do is you could grab a ball tool, and something that is interesting is you could add little accents of your own texture to this. Like so. Just to create a more interesting and different effect, because especially with textures that are mass produced, a lot of the time everybody has the exact same texture, and so if you want to make your creations look a little bit different from other people's, this is a great way to do it. You can just add your own little bit of flair to the textures. And so I'll just continue doing that so that I can demonstrate how it looks, and now I'll keep this side plain so you can see how different it looks in the end. There we go. So this side is the textured and has had the little ball tools on it, and this side is just the plain original texture. So hopefully you can see how interesting this side is versus this side. It's completely different, and it just makes quite a big difference when you're trying to make your jewellery look different from the competition. So it's something you can do with just about any texture, so long as it's not too busy. If the texture's already fairly busy, then this might not necessarily work, because adding too much can be distracting. So I wouldn't do this on something that's fairly busy, but on something that's a fairly plain texture like this, it's a great opportunity to do. And if you make these ball tool marks deep enough, you can even use it on things like mica shifts and mukume gane to make the texture different. So hopefully that tip was helpful to you. These are basically the last two tips, where you can make a reverse or you can embellish your texture. Now I'll bring over our other two, which should be finished baking by now, and I will show you what their textures look like. Alright, so they're out of the oven, and they're quite flexible, so you can see. Depending on what clay brand you use, they're going to be more or less flexible. I mostly use Polymer, and so you can see it's flexible. It's not so flexible that you can do a satin slice, but it's not completely rigid so much that it's going to break. So let's start off with the first one that we made. We'll do it in that order. And I have got a piece of clay off to the side here, and let me just cut it into three. There. And I've dusted both sides with cornstarch so that it doesn't stick. You can use water as well, but I generally prefer cornstarch. And I've dusted both sides because the clay will stick to your fingers as well. And you can use a roller. I'm choosing to use my fingers, but the clay will stick to either your roller or your fingers if you don't dust the other side with cornstarch, or if you don't spray the other side with water. So you can spray a stamp with water or dust it with cornstarch. Sometimes though you need to just make sure you're using the right brand of clay before spraying water, because things like Cerner and powder don't like water and they become quite sticky actually. Alright, and now it might be fairly difficult for you to see that. I'm going to put that to the side, and I'm going to roll out these ones as well, and then I will highlight them and you'll be able to see. Right, and here's the last one. So now before we highlight this one, I'm going to cut it out using the same cutter I used to create the actual texture. Let me just grab that, and I'm just going to position that and cut. There we go. I'm just going to take a little bit of Gilder's paste, and I'm using Inca Gold. And this is a nice way to highlight textures as well. So I'm just going to grab a bit. Hopefully you can see there the texture showing up. I'm going to continue highlighting this until it's nice and bright and easy to see, and I will repeat with the other two textures that I have as well. Okay, and here we go. All three of our textures. And now this one, you can see, hopefully, let me just turn that the right way around. Hopefully you can see there that it matches very nicely with the texture. It's basically the same. So that's really cool. So that's a cool option for if you have silk screens but you don't have textures that really match. This is the one done with the stencil, and you can see it's quite different than the silk screen, because due to the stencil being caved in all around, sitting on it, it allows you to get kind of a domed effect rather than a straight down effect, which is what the silk screen gave. And this one is just a nice way to create the same texture on a shape over and over again. So this isn't this isn't a good example of what you could do with the shape. You'd want to do some really nice cool things like make a faux metal effect, but this is an example of a way to create a repeatable texture that is unique to you, but at the same time is repeatable, so that if you're selling things, you don't have to constantly redo the same texture. It makes it a lot quicker. So that's basically it for today's tutorial. I do hope that you found it helpful. There are quite a few tips and tricks in here. Hopefully at least one of them will appeal to you and will help you in your polymer clay journeys. Wherever you do your polymer clay, hopefully it will help. And let me know in the comments below what you thought, and I'll see you in the next tutorial. Bye for now.